or have another print disability which makes reading, holding a book, or turning a page difficult or impossible. The content is copyrighted by the respective publishers. For more information, please visit us on the web at nfradioreading.org.
Hello and good evening. This is Don Swans, and for the next hour, I'll be reading from the March 29th issue of the Wall Street Journal Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Front page. A couple of elderly Jews with a rabbi, his hand on the lady's shoulder, standing at a grave site. The headline, Jews begin to wonder, is anywhere safe? The picture I described was in Sydney, Australia. The article is by regular contributor Natasha Dengdor. Earlier this month, Guy Wolf, the president of the Jewish Cultural Center in Liège, Belgium, awoke to alarming news. Overnight, an IED was detonated outside his local synagogue, blowing out the windows and setting the front doors and nearby cars alight. The attack on the historic temple was the first such incident in the city since the Holocaust, according to local officials. Though Wolf had heard about a rise in anti-Semitic attacks in other cities, he was taken aback that it happened in Liège. There are only about 500 Jewish people in this city of 500,000. The synagogue is not particularly active, and the Jews are well integrated. If you attack the Jewish community here, Wolf said, you're attacking the city of Liège, because we are completely inside of it. The whole thing has left the 68-year-old Wolf wondering, if Jews can't feel safe here, can they feel safe anywhere? This is an increasingly urgent question for Jewish communities as anti-Semitism rises across the globe, and particularly in the West, where Jews have lived in relative peace since the end of World War II. But a spasm of anti-Semitic violence and hostile rhetoric stemming from conflicts in the Middle East is making many Jews feel increasingly isolated from their homelands and their neighbors. In addition to the attack in Liège, the following incidents happened in just the past 3 weeks. 4 Jewish charity ambulances were firebombed in North London, England. An armed man rammed a vehicle into Temple, Israel in Michigan, while 140 children were inside the school. 3 synagogues in Toronto, Canada were hit by gunfire within days of each other. 4 people were arrested after an arson attack damaged a synagogue in Rotterdam, Holland. A Jewish school was attacked in Amsterdam, Holland. 2 Jewish men overheard speaking Hebrew were beaten outside a restaurant in San Jose, California, by men shouting, "Don't mess with Iran." British police said they were investigating a possible hate crime after spectators at a school football match in the UK shouted, "Go back to the gas chambers," at students from the visiting London Jewish Free School. The October 7 attack on Israel was a devastating assault that left 1,200 Israeli adults and children dead, triggered a hostage crisis, and perhaps most shockingly for many, sparked cheers in allied nations. The ferocity of Israel's counterattack on Hamas and other militants in Gaza, which turned swaths of the Palestinian enclave into rubble and killed more than 60,000 people, according to local health authorities, in turn fueled global anger, including among the estimated 50 million Muslims that now call Europe home, as well as about 6 million more in North America. The new war, launched by Israel and the United States against Iran in February, is raising passions further. The target of the anger is not just Israel, but Jews the world over. In a globalized world, there is a sense among Jews that, unlike the past, there is no far-flung land to escape to, said Sarah Hirschhorn, historian at the University of Haifa in Israel. It seems for Jews that there's a calculus of the lesser of evils, she said. Jews no longer have any one safe harbor. It is now a question of relative safety in a dangerous world. Displacement and persecution is part of the Jewish narrative and identity. From the biblical exodus from Egypt, which Jews will mark beginning Wednesday with the celebration of Passover, to being kicked out of Spain in 1492, to being rounded up and gassed in Germany, Poland, and elsewhere in the 1940s. After Israel was established in 1948 as a haven for Jews, another wave of displacements followed as nearly 1 million Jews were expelled or fled from Middle Eastern countries in reprisal for about 700,000 Palestinians who fled or who were kicked out. Fighting over the creation of the Jewish state. Since the 1960s, the world's remaining Jews, just under 16 million, compared with 2.5 billion Christians and 2 billion Muslims, have thrived in Europe, Australia, the U.S., and Israel. But now the memory of the Holocaust is fading, and younger generations and a growing number of Muslim immigrants have a dim view of Israel, especially since the Gaza war filled social media feeds with images of death and destruction. Behind the recent surge in hostility is a combination of radical Islamic beliefs and anti-Jewish sentiment on the far left and far right of Western politics. According to Deborah Lipstadt, professor of modern Jewish history and Holocaust studies at Emory University in Atlanta, I have never seen in my lifetime a period when anti-Semitism has been expressed so overtly by the right and the left, said Lipstadt. They agree on nothing else, only on Jew hatred. And unlike previous eras of anti-Semitism, social media has given them platforms to reach millions, she added. Even before the Gaza war, there was a growing red-green alliance between the far left and Islamists in Europe and North America. Among many young leftists, Jews aren't viewed with sympathy as a persecuted minority, but rather as white oppressors, Lipstadt said. A recent survey by the Union of Jewish Students in the UK showed that 1/5 of college students wouldn't be open to having a Jewish housemate. While traditional anti-Semitism on the right has been given a new lease on life by economic dislocation in parts of the West, it has now been joined by a new and virulent strain of anti-Zionist anti-Semitism, said Hirshhorn. While there may have been some efforts to make Jew hatred more unpalatable in polite society, open and even violent hatred towards Zionism, Zayos Israel, Israelis, and supporters of Israel has been given a new carte blanche. From U.S. college campuses to the streets of European and Australian cities, pro-Palestinian protests since the October 7th attacks regularly shouted calls to globalize the Intifada, the Arabic word for uprising. Protesters say the phrase is meant to convey opposition to Israel's occupation. But many Jews hear it as a call to repeat two violent uprisings by Palestinians, particularly the Second Intifada from 2000 to 2005 that included numerous suicide bombings aimed at Israeli civilians. Many Jews now feel like those calls are coming true, echoed in attacks the past year across the globe, including in Australia's Bondi Beach, Washington, D.C., Boulder, Colorado, and Manchester, England. Officials and police in Birmingham, England, which is 30% Muslim, banned visiting fans from Maccabi Tel Aviv for a November match with Aston Villa because the city police couldn't guarantee their safety. Surveys show that the most Muslims in Europe have integrated well, though they have also faced growing incidents of hate crimes. In Britain, the vast majority of British-born Muslims have a strong attachment to the country. But polls also show some differences. A 2024 survey shows only 24% of British Muslims believe Hamas committed murder and rape on October 7th, compared with 62% of the public at large. A quarter of Muslims said the Israel-Palestine issue was the most important public policy issue, compared with just 3% for the broader public. Muslims were more than twice as likely to say Jews had too much influence over institutions like the media or finance. A separate survey this month showed British Muslims, unlike the general public, have far more positive views of Iran, China, and Russia than the U.S. or Israel. Righteous posted footage of the Rotterdam attack and claimed responsibility for it, as well as the attacks in Liège and London, according to the European Jewish Congress, a group representing Jewish communities across Europe. Several European governments have said they suspect the group has links to Iran. The perpetrators of the Michigan attack, 41-year-old Ayman Mohammed Ghazali, was Lebanese-born U.S. citizen, whose two brothers were killed in an Israeli airstrike in Lebanon in recent weeks. Israel's army said one of the brothers, Ibrahim, was a commander in Hezbollah, though the claim could not be verified. The recent spasm of anti-Jewish hatred that has swept the country has shocked and scared many, wrote Simon Sebag Montefiore, a prominent British historian, on X Wednesday. He said many anti-Semites hide their bigotry behind criticism of Israel and the language of human rights. But no one kills Russian, Emirati, Iranian, Ukrainian, Saudi, Sudanese, Chinese, Pakistan, Indian, or American people, or attacks their communities because of the actions of their governments. And they certainly do not do so in terms of cosmic evil, only in this case. While the attacks gain global media attention, it is daily life that has gotten less comfortable for many Jews who participate in communal life. Outside synagogues and Jewish schools, concrete barriers and high walls and security personnel are a constant reminder of the threats they face. 2 days after Bondi, an attack that killed a 10-year-old girl, a Syrian Jewish rabbi in West London, Dayan Daniel Qaeda, said he found an image of a person killing a child graffitied outside his synagogue. Jews in Belgium have been pushed off bicycles, punched in the streets, and a child was beaten outside of a school, according to a Belgian organization that monitors anti-Semitic incidents, which has recorded an 80% increase in anti-Semitic acts between 24 and 2025. It feels like the 1930s, said Ralph Paye, 45-year-old real estate investor who splits his time between Antwerp and Brussels. Paye says that anti-Semitism has grown so intolerable that some of his circle of friends have left Belgium for the Americas. His own 2 children recently moved to New York to study and do not plan on returning. The youth are leaving in huge numbers, Pai said. He says he considered moving himself, but that he was staying to set an example for his community. My rabbi told me that if I leave, everyone will panic. The issue isn't whether Jews can live somewhere. It is whether they can live there openly, proudly, and without fear, said Ted Deutsch, the CEO of the American Jewish Congress. And in too many places in the world right now, the answer is no. For some, Israel still feels like the only safe place. The country has been at war intermittently for decades and is a regular target for terrorist attacks. But for Jews who have been a minority all their lives, living in a country surrounded by other Jews brings comfort, said Keda. Statistically speaking, you're probably more likely to be harmed in Israel, but somehow everyone feels much safer there. As of September this year, over 50,000 Jews globally have immigrated to Israel since October 7, 2023, according to the Jewish Agency for Israel. However, Israel's Central Bureau of Statistics identified a sustained decline in immigrants to Israel following the October 7, 2023 attack. Israel or America? That reality of the current Jewish anxiety was captured in a recent Israeli comedy skit. 2 friends cross paths in a Tel Aviv airport. One is moving from Israel to America and the other is doing the opposite. They both cite safety concerns and claim the other is just walking into a trap. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Here's an intriguing headline. It takes us in a different direction. The timeless fear of corrupting the youth, by Jacob Magama and Jeff Kosef, both regular contributors. Magama is executive director at the Future of Free Speech. Kosef is a non-resident senior fellow at the Future of Free Speech. They are the authors of the forthcoming book, The Future of Free Speech, Reversing the Global Decline of Democracy's Most Essential Freedom. In 399 BCE, Socrates was put on trial before a jury of some 500 of his fellow Athenians. The indictment accused him of impiety and added, "Socrates, is also guilty of corrupting the youth. Despite the Athenian democracy commitment to free speech and equal speech, Socrates was found guilty and sentenced to death. 2.5 millennia later, democracies are still deeply concerned about dangerous ideas corrupting the youth. This time the target isn't dangerous philosophy, but an increase in teen mental health issues blamed on social media. Over the past year, a global tsunami of laws and bills have been enacted or proposed that ban minors from social media platforms or require age verification for accessing certain types of content. This week, a Los Angeles jury delivered a $6 million verdict against Google's YouTube and Meta in a lawsuit filed by a woman who said that her childhood social media use led to an addiction that impacted her mental health, and that the companies were to blame. As in ancient Athens, they're most vocal about the need to protect children from corrupting influences, insist that such drastic measures constitute a defense of rather than an attack on democratic values and social cohesion. But such measures, though well-intentioned, carry serious implications for the freedoms of speech and access to information, as well as the right to privacy for children and adults alike. Among the most influential proponents of age verification laws is New York University professor Jonathan Haidt, author of the best-selling book, The Anxious Generation, which has had an enormous impact on the movement to protect children from social media. Haidt says that the phone-based childhood has resulted in an international epidemic of adolescent mental illness, and that social media use is a cause of anxiety and depression. Haidt's book was the most direct inspiration behind Australia's regulatory measures that culminated in a pioneering federal law banning children under 16 from social media, which came into effect in December 2025 and now serves as a global template. But substantial questions still surround the evidence and call into question whether legislation is an effective cure with no serious side effects. Even if the harms are as devastating as some argue, it does not necessarily follow that blanket bans will effectively mitigate those harms. New laws could lead to unintended consequences for other vital democratic interests that may outweigh uncertain benefits. In 2024, a review of the scientific literature by a committee at the National Academies of Science, Engineering, and Medicine had found that despite some potential harms, the review did not support the conclusion that social media causes changes in adolescent health at the population level. A 2026 longitudinal study in the Journal of Public Health reached a similar conclusion. But even if we accept the verdict that social media is the cause of rising teen mental health harms, the case for age gating focuses primarily on the harms while discounting any benefits of social media for children. Social media has the potential to connect friends and family. It may also be valuable to teens and who otherwise feel excluded or lack offline support, according to the National Academies of Science. It also highlights the possible benefits of online access for young people coping with serious illness, bereavement, and mental health problems, as well as opportunities for learning and developing interests. That point is especially important for vulnerable teenagers whose offline environments may be isolating or hostile. This is why comparing social media to tobacco is questionable. The scientific consensus on smoking's harms is unanimous, and no one claims smoking has benefits. Neither is true for social media. The intentions behind youth social media restrictions may be noble, but the real-world implementation of the policy proposals is already having unintended consequences for free speech and online privacy. After Australia's ban, some users submitted selfies for facial recognition and uploaded government IDs to access social media. Although nearly 5 million accounts have been deactivated, tech-savvy teens have found ways around the age requirements. 3 months after the ban took effect, reports emerged that 20% of Australian teenagers aged 13 to 15 are still using banned apps like TikTok and Snapchat. Others have shifted to using lesser-known platforms, raising concerns that such apps may pose security and privacy risks. In July 2025, age check requirements for broadly defined harmful content under the United Kingdom's Online Safety Act also took effect, leading to a chaotic rollout. UK Reddit users found themselves locked out of age-gated content without first submitting a photo of their government ID or uploading a selfie to a third-party vendor. As the Electronic Frontier Foundation has reported, subreddit communities on topics from LGBTQ issues reporting on the facts in Ukraine and Gaza and public health were blocked for unverified users, including adults who wanted to discuss these topics while remaining anonymous. The U.S. Supreme Court supported the right to anonymity in 1960, finding that the First Amendment practices anonymous speech, since anonymous pamphlets, leaflets, brochures, and even books have played an important role in the progress of mankind. Age verification laws would risk corroding that progress in having people to submit identifying data in exchange for the ability to express themselves. Courts have ruled that children have First Amendment rights. In blocking an Ohio law, a U.S. District Court ruled that conditioning minor social media participation on parental consent is an impermissible curtailment of their First Amendment rights. Judges have reached similar conclusions regarding laws in the state of Georgia and the state of Arkansas. Authoritarian and illiberal states provide a grim window into how the protection of children can be weaponized to suppress dissent. In 2012, Russia enacted an internet blacklist law with the stated intention of protecting children from harmful content. The law laid the groundwork for Russia's heavily censored Red Web that now entirely prohibits many foreign social media platforms. The same goes in Indonesia, which this month announced a ban on social media for those under 16. But Indonesia is also a country that has used the pretext of child protection to block and censor gay social networking apps and content. The lesson from these examples is not that protecting children online is misguided or an unworthy goal. It is that the means proposed to achieve this end pose significant risks to human rights, and that the tools created for that purpose can easily become instruments of broader control over speech once governments acquire them. There are less intrusive ways to address the real concerns driving this regulatory rush. Phone-free school policies, which Haidt has also strongly advocated, digital literacy programs, comprehensive and rigorous national privacy laws, and active parental involvement all hold promise. Democracies have always worried about dangerous ideas corrupting the youth. Intellectuals and lawmakers should absolutely be concerned about how and when our children navigate social media. But they should also be concerned about whether, in our rush to protect our children, we are building an infrastructure of surveillance and censorship that will ultimately threaten the hard-won freedoms that we want future generations to enjoy. You're listening to a reading of articles and features from the Wall Street Journal Review on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Here's a headline. This executive may be the future of music. He is also enemy number one. The question further on is an AI song actually music? Mickey Schulman says yes. Who's Mickey Schulman? The scariest man in music these days is a trim, antsy, matter-of-fact ex-physicist named Mickey Schulman. He didn't have enough talent to make it beyond college jam bands, but he does have a gift for artificial intelligence and a vision for music where talent matters less. I think of this as the next format of recorded music, Schulman says adamantly over breakfast in Beverly Hills a few days before the Grammys. I understand why there is some negative energy around it, but you show people that this is an incredible tool. More music in the world is actually a good thing. Does music generated by artificial intelligence have the same value as that created by the human spirit? This is the question hanging over Schulman, the co-founder and CEO of AI music generator Suno, S-U-N-O, who thinks anyone with a laptop should be able to create music, piano, or guitar lessons be damned. Suno's platform allows users to create tunes by typing in a few words of written prompts. Tap in a few text descriptors: male blues vocal, 80s synth pop with dark romance, death metal with accordion, and out comes an AI-produced song within a matter of minutes. A song created with Suno, however, how was I supposed to know? ? By AI avatar Zanya Monet, hit number 20 on Billboard's Hot R&B song charts last year. All of this has catapulted the 39-year-old Schulman into the music industry's elite. It has also made him enemy number one in some circles. He may have spent a week hobnobbing with label executives and artists during a whirlwind of parties before the Grammys on February 1, but behind the scenes, the mood was tense. Suno's popular AI model was trained on songs scrapped from the internet instead of licensed from creators and owners, aggravating industry leaders who insist they are embracing AI but should be compensated for the human-created music that is Suno's lifeblood, music that they say was essentially stolen. Their product is 100% trained on musicians' intellectual property and life's work, without consent, transparency, and compensation, says Tiff Merritt, a singer-songwriter and board member of the Artist Rights Alliance. Suno claims it trained its model based on the doctrine of fair use. Regardless, Schumann's critics say Suno-generated songs are flooding music streaming platforms and diluting the royalty pool for those same artists. Some in the industry minimize Suno's future, arguing the company worth $2.45 billion could fade in the AI wave like a music industry version of MySpace. Even more worrying to some is what Schumann represents in an era when music is increasingly populist. Is Schumann the face of the next hit to the music gatekeepers, or a destroyer of the music those gatekeepers want to protect? The last technological revolution ravaged the record music industry. With the rise of digital music in the late 1990s and early 2000s, the labels resisted the transformation. They sued file-sharing platform Napster, which promoted widespread piracy. CD sales plummeted. It took them a decade to absorb the shock, eventually rearranging their entire business around platforms like Apple's iTunes and later Spotify. But those were business problems. This time, new technology strikes at the heart of creativity itself. And the uncertainty has left many artists hesitant to say whether they should or whether they would or would not use AI publicly. It's uncomfortable to go counterculture, and if you have the whole industry being against something, it can be scary to be a little more public, Schumann says, sipping his green juice. But I think these things just take time. In the studio and in meetings, Schumann has the restless energy of a kid, pacing around the room or fidgeting with a piano keyboard or bass guitar, combined with the intellectual effect of a quant. He grew up in Manhattan and New Jersey in a large, tight-knit Jewish family with 52 first cousins. He started piano lessons at age 4, but soon recognized he didn't have the same level of talent on the keys as his 2 older brothers. He later picked up the bass guitar, though he cannot remember exactly why. He played in bands with friends, but says the names of his bands are secret. These people are going to find the music. It's not what I want. He studied physics at Harvard, and after getting his doctorate in 2015, he was the first machine learning hire at Kensho, an AI firm for finance. It was at a few after-hours music jam sessions with his co-workers that they got to talking about how in the world AI audio had become a second-class citizen. They founded Suno in 2022. We figured it out more quickly than we anticipated, which is a lovely mistake or lovely accident, he says. As soon as we did, we were staying up late making music with these models. It was like the old jam sessions, just entirely on a computer. Welcome or not, Suno has grown to $300 million in annual revenue with 2 million paid subscribers and a headline-grabbing valuation. They have hired former employees of Snapchat, TikTok, and Spotify. Last year, Suno announced a major move toward industry approval. It struck its first deal with one of the three major record companies that have been fighting the company in court. Instead of carrying on with the case, Warner Music Group agreed to settle its copyright infringement claims against Suno and for Suno to develop new AI-supported products based on licensed music. WMG Chief Executive Robert Kyncl, former YouTube executive, says Schumann wants to find an equilibrium between the needs of artists or songwriters and the users in order to build a thriving business and ecosystem. Anybody who's willing to do that, he says, has my vote. At times, Schumann puts his foot in his mouth. Last year, he told the podcast 20VC with Harry Stebbins that the majority of people don't enjoy the majority of the time they spend making music because of the time and effort to learn and practice upsetting the creative class who protested that they, in fact, relished the process. Schumann says he was misunderstood. The whole spark for the company is realizing that the most fun I've ever had is making music with my friends. Just days before Grammy Week, he was quoted by The Guardian repeating a description he heard of Suno being the Ozempic of music, because artists are using it, but not willing to publicly admit it. In an interview with the Journal, he says it has since been incorrectly attributed to him, though he doesn't disagree. The quote made the rounds among executives with plenty of eye rolls. No matter what he says, people are going to throw rocks, says Paul Sinclair, a former Atlantic Records executive who is now chief music officer for Suno. Universal, which is the largest music label group in the world, has taken an especially aggressive posture towards Suno. Along with Sony, Universal is suing the company, claiming it ripped copyrighted music from YouTube by circumventing YouTube's encryption methods designed to block such action. In a court filing, Suno said the claim is legally unsound. It's not that Universal and Sony are against AI. Universal has made deals with smaller AI companies, including Udio, which has agreed to train a new model only on licensed songs and develop a service that, unlike Suno, keeps user-generated AI songs within the Udio platform. This so-called walled garden model, similar to how a user streams songs only within the platform of Apple Music or Spotify, has become the more palatable alternative to many. Warner Music Group has also made a deal with Udio for licensed music. Schumann insists his vision is about partnering with the industry. The Silicon Valley ethos of the old industry is totally cooked, or something like that. It's just not true that at all in music, he says. The labels are some of the most culturally important entities in the world, not just in music. I don't see any reason why that should change. Maybe how they do it is going to change. What AI products will ultimately look like largely depends on how labels, songwriters, and artists allow their works to be used, a question that is still unanswered. Meanwhile, Suno is on a campaign to convince the industry. In January, Schumann floated into a West Hollywood nightclub packed with members of the music industry's upper class. People who represented the interests of the biggest artists in the world. It was a night to honor Billboard's annual Power 100, the list of music executives. He had made the list for the first time at number 34. Schumann, wearing a blue checker sport coat in a sea of black, watched as music royalty Lucian Grange, chairman of Universal Music Group and the evening's top honoree on the list, took the stage to deliver a warning about artificial intelligence. All of us will be challenged to be able to define what real creativity actually means and how we can protect the role of creative artists. Human beings with original ideas and soul. Exiting the event, Schumann shuffled out with the crowd, heading next to a TikTok Grammys party, mumbling to a fellow attendee that his company seemed to be persona non grata. A few days later, though, his calendar was packed with meetings. Sure, in public, some executives may give him the cold shoulder, but when he's in small meetings or dealings with executives one-on-one, he says the vibe is excitement. We will discover and create new kinds of music, new genres, new forms of music, and I think people are skeptical, then they start to see it in action. They slowly come around. But we're patient. We plan to be around a while. You've been listening to a reading of articles and features from the March 28th issue of the Wall Street Journal Review. We read from the Wall Street Journal Review every Thursday at 7 p.m. Your reader tonight has been Don Swans, and we thank you. We thank you very much for listening, and certainly hope that next week you'll be here at the same time on the dial of the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service. Good evening.
Coming up next on the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service will be the New York Times. Following at 9 o'clock is Money Magazine. And at 10 o'clock, we have episode number 19 of The Secret of Secrets by Dan Brown. Stay with us for these readings and more. If you or people you know shop at any of the Dash's supermarkets, please save Dash's register tapes for radio reading. Our agency receives $2 for every $100 in Dash's register tapes. Radio reading has raised thousands of dollars so far. Anyone can drop off their Dash's tapes to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, between William and Clinton Streets. Or Dash's tapes can be mailed to the Niagara Frontier Radio Reading Service at 1199 Harlem Road, Cheektowaga, New York, 14227. Any questions on Dash's tapes for radio reading? Call us at 716-821-5555, and thanks for caring. The following program is intended for listeners who are blind, have low vision, or have another print disability